comfortably play from out there. Carolina's tried to get these kind of guys in past recruiting classes, when knowing that the game is evolving towards that. They just haven't recruited them successfully. Luke May kind of became that, but Luke May was also undersized. Mm-hmm. You get a guy that's 6'11" that could go out and play comfortably on the wing. It really transforms the way Carolina's going to run their offense with their floor spacing and really just everything else in general with this team.
Yeah, I mean, he could kind of play all over. I mean, this is a guy that can play the 4 or the 5, which, we basically, like you said, we tried to turn Luke May into that. He was not a guy that could play the 5. Where this, I mean, at 6'11", 220, he's got the size to play a 5. Now, I don't, he wouldn't be as effective as the guy we just talked about, but he's still a guy that I think could be effective there. You talked about it, can run the floor really well, guy that stretches the floor. You always love those types of guys, especially in a game that is becoming more and more shooting based. I mean, look at the draft in the NBA this year. I mean, a guy like Cam Johnson went 11th, plain and simply because he can shoot. So that's what the game of basketball is becoming. I mean, this is one of those offers where, I mean, he is a 5-star. How is he gonna look at Carolina? It's kind of interesting to see, because I think for the longest time, it was pretty much always seen that Kentucky and Duke were going to be the people that were, Calipari and Kay were the ones that were controlling guys like this. Now, with the NCAA kind of out of our hair, you can start to see with guys like Armando Bacot, guys like Kobe White, Nazir Little, all of a sudden Roy is starting to re-enter the conversation, and some of these kids are saying, okay, now it's a 3-horse race at the top. So we'll see. I'm not one of those guys that's going to sit here and say, oh, he's a 5-star, we must land this kid. Or I don't say that with really anybody at this point, because I think Roy knows what he's doing. But, it would be nice to see a guy as talented as this and as flexible as this as part of the 2020 class.
Yeah, and what Roy Williams did on Monday, offering 3 guys in one day, is not like him.
Yeah, that's pretty unconventional for Roy.
So it says something about the kind of players that these guys are, that this Hall of Fame head coach is doing something he doesn't normally do in his recruiting tactics. And also just it's also him becoming more modern recruiting, understanding, hey, we've got a chance to get these kind of kids again with, like you said, the NCAA off campus. Mm-hmm. It's not how we're going to run the program for the entirety, but we do want to get a couple of these kids every so often and build around them. Some other notes on recruiting before we wrap up. On Monday, we had 3-star Shaquille Moore on campus. He took an unofficial visit to Carolina. And then 4-star Donovan Puff Johnson, of course, the brother of Cam Johnson,
that's right,
was on campus as well. Carolina has offered him, and we figure to be a pretty big key in his recruitment with the success Cam Johnson had at Carolina. Right. I saw something the other day. Cam Johnson was 244th recruit in his recruiting class. He goes to Pittsburgh, transfers to Carolina, and Roy Williams makes him a lottery pick. Probably going to have a say in what his little brother does in terms of his basketball aspirations, seeing what Roy Williams did with his older brother. So those 2 kids were on campus, and we'll finish up. And I'll just run down the list of guys that everyone Carolina has offered in this class. They've offered Day'Ron Sharpe, who, of course, is a committed 5-star. Greg Brown offered 5-star. Cade Cunningham offered 5-star. Hunter Dickinson offered 4-star. Cameron Fletcher offered 4-star. Dawson Garcia offered 5-star. Donovan Johnson offered 4-star. Walker Kessler offered 5-star. Caleb Love offered 4-star. Jaden Springer offered 5-star. Bryce Thompson offered 5-star. Earl Timberlake offered 4-star. Isaiah Todd offered 5-star, and Zaire Williams offered 5-star. I just listed 13 or 14 guys, and they're all 4 or 5-star talented prospects. Other way to put it, Carolina basketball recruiting is back to where they were pre-NCAA in terms of recruiting high-level prospects that are going to be interested in coming to play for this program, which is all we expected once the NCAA case was rested. Any comments before we wrap up?
No, real impressive list there. Sharpe, we like a lot. I think Isaiah Todd is one that I think just about everybody is really wanting. And then, I mean, you look at some of the other names on that list that you could get behind. Donovan Johnson. One of the guys I just from watching some of his tape, I love Jaden Springer. That kid is really good. He was not talked about a lot because he was on the same team as Armando Bacot, and I think that wasn't there another. There was another significant player, I believe, on that IMG roster. So he was kind of the third guy. And I remember watching the Geico Nationals, and they kept bringing up this guy, Jaden Springer, and I'm just like, who is this kid? Went back and watched a little bit more on him, and he's one that, I would really love to see in this class. There's a lot of them, and you're right. I mean, you look, all of those guys are 4 or 5 stars. Even if they did have some 3 stars on there, look, at this point, I trust Roy Williams, seeing what he did with a guy like Luke May. But to see this and to see us back with, in good standing with guys that are 4 and 5 stars, mostly 5 stars, people need to be confident in what this coaching staff is doing because they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. I'd like Anthony for joining me again today. As we discussed, of course, Brandon Robinson's season and an update you guys on recruiting. You know where to find the podcast. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So anywhere you can find your podcast, you can find the Roy's Boys. Go subscribe, rate us, give us a comment, do whatever you want. Well, thank you guys for listening, and go Tar Heels.